Hey, out there. I hope you can hear and see me. So, welcome to the first of what is going to be a 7-part Facebook Live series, a discussion and reading series from my new book, Break the Grip of Past Lovers. Can you see it? There. There's 7 different topics already, but the first topic today is why there's no such thing as casual sex. Hi, Kimberly Wagner. So my intention with this series is to have about a half of an hour each time. We have 7, they're scheduled. You can see it on my Facebook timeline, the schedule. What I want to do is 2 things. First, I just want to read from the book and have some time live with you all around some of what the book is diving into. To connect you to the book if it's meant to be for you and if it would be a support for you. And that leads me to the second thing, which is that I have 2 weeks until my book launches officially. And so this is a great time for you to order the book if you want it. And I have I made an online course for it called Sacred Needs and Your Sexual Archetype. So you can get started right away into the whole work. So those are my 2 intentions. 1, to be with you. 2, to let you know about the book. And here it is again. Break the Grip of Past Lovers. Hierophant Publishing has published this. They've been wonderful to work with. And you can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So let's get into it because I only have a half an hour and I'm gonna wanna have longer than that. So Break the Grip of Past Lovers. We're gonna read from the introduction a little bit about, well, the topic is why there's no such thing as casual sex. So I'm going to read for a few minutes, and then I would love to discuss with you and hear from you what lights up in you or how you relate to this work, these words. So here we go. I keep feeling like I should have spectacles. Like I feel like a librarian or professor. Okay, here we go. Past lovers, whether they were with you for a night or for decades, leave impressions that can linger long after the relationship is over, and in many cases dramatically affect your self-esteem, your capacity for future intimacy, and your emotional well-being. Whether we like it or not, there is rarely, if ever, such a thing as casual sex. In the current cultural climate, where sexual relationships swing between careless impulse and overly moralized repression, our society has lost the pulse of what truly healthy and vibrant female sexuality is. We no longer know what to do when a sexual relationship falls apart, leaving the wreckage of betrayal, abandonment, neglect, or even abuse in its wake. So many women are suffering from mild discomfort to full-blown anxiety, from depression to total sexual shutdown, from desperate loneliness to recklessly empty promiscuity. As women, we are capable of so much more, but we are rarely, if ever, shown the way. Hi, everybody who's joining. So I'll keep reading. I just want to make a note that one of the things that defines this book and the process of kind of clearing past lovers, but more importantly, harvesting the power from past loverships, is that it uses the experience of a past sexual relationship, one that's lingering, one that has had impact, or one that you still feel bound by. It uses that. We start from that place, but we use it to initiate into deeper sexual sovereignty and to really step into stewardship of personal power as a woman incarnate. So the book is addressing past lovers, but not in any way staying there. And it's not going to bring you into a to an oppositional place where you're actually still getting further entangled in what you actually are ready to be liberated from. Okay, we'll read a little bit more and then I would love to hear from you. Female sexuality is a unique weave of physical energy, emotional connection, mental engagement, and spiritual communion. Sadly, this weave has been ignored, invalidated, or even demonized by much of our society over time. As a result, The mysteries of female sexuality are buried under mountains of over-sexualized cultural patterning, dismissal of the rich heritage of deep feminine reverence and power, and ignorance of the vast inner terrain that lives within women. We must remember and honor the fact that we were created to be sexual creatures, freed from the pendulum swing of oppression and reaction to that oppression. Liberated from all that push and pull, we have the opportunity to recover and know the radical truth, wisdom, and sexual wholeness that is our birthright. This is not a cultural, social, or personality-based liberation. This is a recovery of deep feminine power and knowledge that will free you regardless of circumstance. And I think that's a really important distinction and an important clarity, that what is going to bring us into fullness is not going to stop and is not going to occupy the place in our beings that our personalities, our culture, our social realities occupy. It's going to be deeper than that. So in the book especially, the movement is toward reclaiming the depth and the breadth of your inner terrain and of your full capacity as a woman. So where we abandon that and where we haven't yet stepped into residency of that or stepped into full stewardship of that is often reflected in sexual relationships, because they're so powerful, they're so intimate, they're so alchemical, right? And so often troubling, unfortunately, or stunningly beautiful, but also heartbreaking, right? Okay. Think of breaking the grip of past lovers as code for freeing yourself of deeply unconscious limitations and misunderstandings you've inherited about what it means to be a woman, particularly a woman of sexual desire, longings, emotion, and passion. The breaking free process will require you to be more vulnerable and more sensitive with yourself. The good news is that this will bring you to a place that is vastly more powerful and healing than you can imagine. So that is simply the intro to the book. How did that land? Anybody? We're going to be able to get into, we're going to get into quite a few things over this series, but where we're beginning with it, and the invitation today is just to consider for a minute in your own being, has there ever been anything truly that you've experienced that has actually been truly casual in your sexual experiences? I mean, I recognize that we often have casual sex. That doesn't mean that we might not enter intimacies that are only for a night or that are not long-term and committed. But what the book is addressing is that if we actually start to come into full residency in our body, if we do start the process of reclaiming our voice, reclaiming our desires and our needs and what we're actually feeling, rather than staying in the habit field a lot of us are consciously or unconsciously in, of leaving our bodies during intimacy, or not just actually not being present. When we become present, what I've noticed for pretty much all women is that there is an encounter then with the impact and what has truly been happening while we've been taking people into our bodies, knowing that as we come to fully become soul custodians of ourselves, we start to realize that a sexual intimacy is touching us on pretty much every level of our being, usually, where there's feeling, there's yearning, there's incredible vulnerability. If we allow it, there's power, there's chemistry, there's soul a lot of the time, right? There's so much happening. And where the book comes from, for me, is being in a place of severe anxiety and depression and disconnection from myself. from being in relationships, and specifically a relationship that I was deeply compromising my values in. And I had to go through the process of reclaiming what had been really natural to me, actually. So in that came all these practices. In that came all of this, what the book is about. And out of that came circles of women and a whole body of work. And what I realized was that it was actually really core to my entire being, that what I was experiencing in intimate relationships was in my intimate relationship was reflecting into everything. And from the outside, and I think this is actually also often very common, from the outside, I would have looked like I had it together. I was raising a goddess temple at the time. I was the portrait of something very different than what I was experiencing on the inside. And to come to the place finally of realizing the cost of compromising my essential self was a difficult but important journey. And it continues, right? It's ongoing. Let me see about some of the comments. Hi, Joaquina Sitka. She's curious if I'm sharing the writings from a place of personal transparency and vulnerability, or are they from more of a place of philosophy and theory? She's having a hard time relating to it from an emotionally connected place. She wants to understand what I'm sharing, but what are the underlying stories? So that was a little bit of it that just came out. In the book, there are moments for sure of going into what's more my personal story and where this came from. The book is not a book of philosophy or concept. It's actually a book that leads you into a more personal revelation. So even though it will, like that first reading is from the intro, right? So it's in a way just establishing the context of the entire book. Right after that, actually, it goes into several pages of my story and why I wrote it and where it came from. But I would say that even then, yes, I think it's valuable to have transparency from me, to know some of where this is coming from. But my focus is actually more on kind of supporting the revelation from inside of the reader. So there are practices, there are inquiries, there's a lot of engagement in the book that makes it into an experience rather than just a conceptual read. So that there is actually energy moving, so that there is actually an opportunity to reckon with some of the things that have happened and liberate them or understand them. So I hope that answers your question. And I will get into a little bit more of that as we go into the different topics. I noticed that when I was making my notes, that some of them are definitely a little more personal to me than others. Jessica's saying, it's true, now I understand more fully what I mean by saying taking residency in ourselves, not denying the depth of our heart. Yeah, and the way that the heart and the womb, the receptive capacity of the female body they're so woven. There's a way that we are enculturated to compartmentalize in certain ways, especially to compartmentalize sex, to kind of forget or be conditioned away from the reality that we ride on the sexual current our entire lives. It ebbs, it flows, but it's always with us. And so actually stewarding it is where we gather a lot of personal power from the depths of our life force. So coming into residency means to actually to have the resiliency and the capacity to feel everything. This is not a book that's having some promise out there that you're going to have the most ecstatic sex and become something, right? This is from the path that I've chosen to take and then to guide other women on, which is coming back and back and back into myself and being willing to be true with what's there, to find voice from there, to make choices from there. And it's not, my experience is always that coming into residency it's always a little bit of it's always a brave courageous move, because you're surrendering a little bit to the mystery of yourself. And that's what is happening as we step into more like a true deep feminine sexuality, is we're saying, what is this? It's new every minute. Can I actually listen to it? Can I actually live and emerge from this place rather than go into all the many portraits, all the many concepts that I have or could go into? Jasmine's saying this thing of deeply compromising her values, she feels and relates to that. What I found by that was that I was very estranged from myself, and it's extremely painful. I'm now really sensitive to it all the time in my whole life, not just in my sexual intimacies. And I really don't like that feeling of not being coherent inside of myself. What I found when I was, what I found is that when I, kind of at the height of my willingness and my patterns of compromising my values, there were all sorts of reasons why. We get into that later. But one of the things that I think is important is that I was pathologizing myself. So I went through a long period of time of not being able to say, like, for instance, in my case, it has to do with sexual fidelity. It has to do with containment. And what really meets me and allows me to open and surrender. I spent literally years deciding, considering, imagining that I was a prude, that I had all these wounds, that I was insecure, that I should this, I should that, I should try this, I mean, there was a litany of all these things, and I tried it all, right? So I had this nice long time of years of exploring all the ways I could pathologize my essential self, only to come back around to the same place I started, which was, that just doesn't work for me. You know, that doesn't open me. I need to be met in this way. I need to be held in this way. This is what feels safe to me. This is what honor looks like to me. It's different for all of us, but it's that place of, you know, for me, I think one of the things that is the most damaging is the internalization of there's something wrong with me, that then plays out in the way we choose and move through our intimacies. So in my case, it was then like, oh, well, I'm uncomfortable here, or I'm not able to open, or I have a different value system than this person I've chosen to be intimate with. There must be something wrong with me. There must be some way I can heal this or change this, and it's such it was like trying to bend myself around, out of myself and around something that would never fit. So that would be one of the things that I would say about the book, the process, the invitation, is to really depathologize ourselves and to instead come into residency and be willing to occupy that place, right? Hope saying she loved the course. So thank you. The book came from, I wrote a course, probably about 5 years ago I wrote this course, and it ended up selling something like 70,000 courses, right? So it hit a nerve, and it was significant to me. It felt like a call. And so the book has come out of that course. It develops and moves beyond, you know, where the course left off and what has evolved since then. Oh, Jessica's asking that. How does the book compare to the online course? So one of the obvious differences between the book and the course is that the course has all sorts of guided meditations and practices in it, and the book doesn't have those. Guided and audio, obviously. It has suggestions for inquiry. It has suggestions for personal ritual. It has engagement in it, but not in the same way. What I'm working on is a 9-part kind of sovereign sexuality course that goes with the book, that then would have guided practices and have that level, that presentation of the work. But the book, I would say, I think it takes it further. It takes it further in terms of it fills out some of what was in the course and organizes it differently. What I would say they helped me with, Hierophant really helped me a lot. Make myself even more accessible, make it more readable, make it simpler and more digestible, which feels really valuable to me. Farida's saying, hi Frida. Receptive capacity of the female body. She's doing stewardship now, and to be in this revelation is quite something, so potent. And now gaining understanding of the sacredness of this and being deeply conscious of who and how I let one into my body temple and sacred feminine self. Yeah, it's in some ways it's so natural and simple, but I think that the truth is we are in a time of, like, a lot has happened to orphan us and to orphan our culture and the unspoken stories in our culture, as well as the very kind of explicit overcultural statements that has separated us from the natural expression and from what would be a natural reverence and a natural guardianship of this. And there is impact, right? And it's not, I have a takeaway. I'm about to give it to you because we only have about 10 minutes left, and I'll come back around to it. But the takeaway, or one of the things I wanted to focus on today too, when we say, or we consider the possible truth that there's no such thing as casual sex, is that, and we were made for this. So there's a way that as women come, as they come into this realization that the female sexual capacity and the female sexual being is multi-layered, sensitive, vulnerable, powerful, there's women can get stuck in like regret or a sense that they've made all these mistakes, or they can get overwhelmed by the potential sensitivity or the potential responsibility of holding themselves. And what I would say is that it is a call forward into personal stewardship, and we were made for this. I don't believe for a second that we would have been sent here on these life paths knowing what this world was going to bring if we did not have redemptive capacity inside. So a lot of what the book is working with is also, it's not just naming how, naming the importance of stepping into reverence and really listening and all these things. It's also saying, and look, you're totally going to have sex that doesn't make any sense, and you're definitely going to make or have made choices that you regret, and there's so much that we are going to encounter and live through, but we are extremely regenerative, right? So it's both. There's a sacred reverence being welcomed, and there's also a real leaning into our capacity for regeneration and our capacity for restoration, that it is actually innate inside of us. And a lot of the practices work with that so that we can also feel a little more free, right? We don't want this to become heavy or, one more thing that we're supposed to do exactly perfectly right. It's more of a full embrace of what we can do, what we're capable of, and what we need. So, Jaya, hi Jaya. How do we find new ways to articulate these deeper layers of ourselves so that we are surrendering into, so that we can invite others into our world, balancing our sovereign inner journeys and sharing connections with others? Yes, how do we discover what meets us? What I think about that is that it's such at least I've been working with that a lot, specifically over the past couple of years with my new partner, and it's just a feeling. But the more that I've been actually kind of forced to sensitize to myself and forced, I don't, in many ways, the cost of relationships that didn't work for me, or the cost of betraying my own truth, has been high enough that I can't afford it anymore. emotionally, physically, on any level. So there's a way I think that for a lot of us, that is the fuel for our fire, right? We hit a point where the cost is so great, we can't go any further. We can't do it that way anymore. So as far as so for me, then what I'm saying in terms of being met, it's become a much more visceral feeling, and a sense that, oh, like if I'm met, then I soften. But I soften into myself. I surrender back down and in. I don't leave myself. I don't go into some ecstatic, it's different than it used to be when I was younger and when I was less willing to stay anchored in myself. So for me, being met, it's a feeling of like, you're right there. You're not too far in. You're not pulling me out. You're not abandoning. You're just meeting. And I will say that has been, I've had to feel my way through it, because it's not been any of the pictures, in many ways, it's not been many of the pictures I would have fabricated from my fantasies, which I lived from a lot. And which did not send me to the best places all the time, right? Sarah's saying, I spent years telling myself I should be able to deal with his infidelity because I was evolved enough to get beyond, so we could have the perfect relationship and I'd prove my worth. That hurts. I feel you. So yes, that's very much exactly where I was, although, well, I was experiencing it as infidelity, right? And it was horrible. And there's such in a way, there's a betrayal of self, but I hope you can join, because when we get into the discussion around betrayal, that we get deeper into what is actually going on when we are betraying ourselves or betrayed by others. Yeah, I feel that, Sarah. Sylvia likes the idea of a follow-up practicum series based on the book. Yep, it'll be like a deeper version of the original course. I'm excited about it. Catherine's saying, I struggle to communicate my boundaries and values with my potential partners. And I think that's very common. I think that there's also a way that a lot of us come into concepts of what we think our boundaries are. Like we decide what our boundaries are or our values are, and we try to present them from a conceptual place. The truth is that it's coming into embodied presence here, where it's just what is. This is my value. This is my boundary. This is where I stop. This is where I won't go any further. It's, what the book and the practices invite in is coming into deeper residency with that, so that it can be heard and received more clearly by others. There's a way that if we haven't taken the time to get very coherent around our value system, or get very clear about what boundaries feel like, what the truth of them is, rather than just our idea of them, it can be hard for other people to fully receive it. We're not sending them like the entire packet. We might be sending mixed signals because we're not sure yet. I'm not talking about consensual sex. I'm talking about just straight up communication. So there's a way that this work of returning home and coming into residency is the work that then doesn't necessarily make it effortless, but makes it potent, makes our presence, our boundaries, our value systems really clear to us. Let me see. Oh no, I'm not. Oh, there it goes. It's scrolling. I'm stuck on this. My thing's not really scrolling. And I promised myself I would end at about half of an hour. So let me see if I can get one more here. Joaquina is, I'll paraphrase what Joaquina is saying. Because I thought somebody would ask that question. I was like, this is going to be fun to see who reacts to the concept of there's no such thing as casual sex. I would say that by casual sex, what I mean is there's often no such thing as sex that doesn't mean anything, or that's truly casual. It doesn't mean that the only kind of sex worth having is a monogamous, committed, some kind of sex at all. What it means is that if you're aware, which it kind of sounds like you are, Joaquina, it's like sex is exactly what you're saying. It's transformational. It's important. It creates personal evolution, right? It's not that there can't be exploration. Of course there can be. It's more that there's been to me, there's a difference between exploratory intimacy and the kind of messaging that I think is in the culture where sex is kind of meaningless. It's casual. It doesn't have potency to it. And I think the truth is it doesn't matter. You can be with someone for a night. You can be with them for 2 decades. There's potency there. And the impacts that we have come from that. And that can be from, feeling neglected or betrayed or whatever. It can be from touching beauty and power and transformative potency and not knowing what to do with it. There's just a lot. I mean, to me, Sitka, what you're saying is that you weren't having, like, in my world, you're not talking about casual sex. You're talking about something that you were in residency of, choices that you were making that were bringing, that brought power, that brought, that weren't casual. They weren't meaningless, right? It doesn't matter that they were maybe, however, they were non-monogamous, right? That's not it at all. I mean, you have to, I think that's the thing, is like, we are way outside of all the boxes. This kind of overly moralized thing, and reckless promiscuity, where there isn't a care for yourself inside of what you're choosing to do, right? So there's this shutdown, or it's kind of abandonment in either way. Somewhere in the middle is the true female sexual current, and it's going to guide us each in really different ways, and probably in different ways throughout our lifetimes. Stewarding that is about getting on the pulse of it and honoring it. So I don't think it takes any particular picture of how then you would want to orient your sexual relationships. Did that make sense, I hope? Sika? Yeah. Frida says, thank you for coming into embodied presence. That's the key to how to have sex that serves both fully and doesn't leave icky residue. Yeah, it's just presence. But what I would say is that it's also, in this book, in the work in general, it is about honoring woman incarnate, this body, this subtle body, the way that, what is this mystery here, right? So it's very much about embodiment and coming out of all the conditionings of the overculture and the subcultures, all the conditionings to actually feel something true. So I'd hang out with you forever, but I can't. And I do have a takeaway. Oh, so my takeaway, which I already said, and there'll be a takeaway every time, is just to leave you with this truth that we were made for this. So whatever you're facing, whether you're in an exploratory place, you're in a long-term relationship that you're wanting to sustain and to kind of build over time and keep infusing your sexual energy into, whether you're recovering from a really painful relationship or you're entering a new one. I mean, there's so many faces to what intimacy will be in our lives. And I'm 100% sure we were made for all of it. That there is nothing. I've witnessed a certain amount of it inside of myself. I've witnessed even more of it in other women, that there is a way that the internalizing the sense that we're broken, internalizing shame, internalizing the sense that some things that happened will never be, can never be resolved, that ignores the vast potential and capacity, the regenerative, restorative, incredible potential and capacity of the female body, right? We are gestational, creative, generative powerhouses, especially if we are truly in stewardship of what lives inside of us. So, thank you. Here's the book again. I'm going to see you like 6 more times over the next 2 weeks. There's the book. I'm going to put a link to order it in the comments. Break the Grip of Past Lovers. And I'm just wanting to get it to whoever needs and wants it. So I appreciate your support in that. And I send you all my love.